In 2014, a loose bell clapper alerted the church that something was seriously wrong with the church bells. This led the PCC to ask Adrian Semkin from the Central Council of Church Bell Ringers to examine the bells. This was the start of an 8-year project.
The problem came to light when one of the clangers, or the striking parts, fell, so we had a health and safety issue.
The installation was in a fairly derelict condition. All the fittings had decayed and it was in no fit state for the bells to be rung.
From that point onwards, the project got a little bit of life of its own because we also discovered, once we started investigating the woodwork, that there was a tower issue and it was rotten at the bottom as well. So from just restoring the bells, it became restore the bells, the bell frame and the tower.
The team knew the restoration works would come at a hefty cost, so at first they were frustrated. However, they soon found out that the restoration could mean the bells would be able to ring full circle once again, something that hadn't been possible for over 130 years, which in turn would open a lot of doors for funding and gave the project a glimmer of hope. Full circle ringing is a technique of ringing a tower bell such that it swings in a complete circle from mouth upwards back to mouth upwards again.
The bells were probably full circle rung until 1888, when the Victorians lowered the tower and put clocking hammers onto the bells so they could only be chimed. The bells are very significant because they're the only ringable set of Miles Gray III that are left in Great Britain and the world. Miles Gray was a bell founder who had his foundry in Head Street in Colchester. He probably cast the bells in a field outside the church. The treble bell actually doesn't have quite enough bell metal in it, so it's pretty obvious they didn't quite bring enough metal with them to cast the cannons on the top of the bell when they made it.
In order to start any restoration work, there were a number of tests that needed to take place.
The first thing we had to do was make sure that the tower itself was going to be safe because it's such of national importance, and David Eve of Historic England commissioned a dendrochronology test.
Using the ox-cow method, Dr. Martin Bridge was able to date the tower between 1383 and 1399.
Once we knew the age of the tower, that made it even more important to make sure that anything we did wasn't going to jeopardise the tower itself. We then also had to test the structure of the tower, and 3 ringing tests were carried out using Walpole of Nottingham and Taylor's Bell Founders put computer sensors all over the tower and the bells and test rung them on the old wheels and the old headstocks. After the bells had been test rung, we then had to seek grant funding, and we were asked to carry out a bell frame survey, which was done by Dr. John Eisel. He took photographs and drawings of the bell frame, and he worked out the age of the various parts. And once all of this had been recorded for historic reference, we were then allowed to proceed with the remedial restoration.
Fundraising was ongoing throughout the entire process so far to pay the fees of all the professionals involved. But it was at this point that grant funding was applied for to make up the rest of the funds for the project.
The overall cost of this project has been in the order of £120,000.
It was incredibly difficult for us to find the funding for this project, basically because we're a very small village in quite a large parish.
The West Hanningfield Friends Group were responsible of raising 25% of the funds for the project, and the local community has supported lots of events, including walks, auctions, heritage open days, open gardens and more.
There were lots of ways that the team went about raising the funds, and one of those that came along was the opportunity to participate in an auction, to have an inscription on the headstock.
The inscription we asked to be put on the headstock of the bell is "Ring out for West Hanningfield." And it just summed it up perfectly, because the whole point of the bells is to carry messages over the fields to the locals to say, hey, something's going on, come and see it.
Once the funds were raised, and after a significant delay due to COVID-19, it was time to start the restoration work. The bells were refurbished off-site at Taylor Bells in Loughborough.
Taylor's essentially are a one-stop shop for anything to do with bells. We cast new bells according to the customer's requirements, and we restore old bells and old bell installation and upgrade them as are needed according to the customer's requirements. Your bells were removed from the tower by our bell hangers and brought here for the restoration. All the old fittings are removed and then they are treated with whatever is required, drilling holes in the appropriate place, and they're fitted with the new metal headstocks, cannon retaining headstocks, which will conserve the old top of the bell, and all of that is treated carefully, respectfully, and will be okay for a long time.
The timber works were taken on by local company Lodge & Sons, who used wood from a local oak tree to replace the rotten pieces and to strengthen the tower.
We had some quite big steels that the engineer had worked out that we needed to use for the propping. Only here as a temporary thing, just to hold the tower up. It was all designed by an engineer to be able to hold the weight of the whole tower as we took pieces out. Each timber had to be looked at individually, as you say, so we kind of work on one at a time. We had to do one side of the tower at a time, just to keep down the weight on the actual steels. Although it should hold it, it was the engineer said to do one at a time. So it basically is taking each one out and cutting it as you go.
Once the timber works were complete, it was time for the bells to return to the church and be rehung.
Right, the bells were brought back by John Taylor and Sons in November 2021, and the lorry arrived near the church and there was several of us to welcome the bells back, and that was a very happy occasion to have them all back looking wonderful.
Well, we've had a little inscription put on there to give thanks for all the years that we've been in West Hanningfield.
We feel very proud, emotional, and it's great to see the bells back.
So the bells will be going up old-fashioned, well, not quite old-fashioned style, but they'll be going up by hand on a chain tackle, block and tackle. They'll go up into the main area above into the tower, and then using a system of sort of pulleys and ropes and things to sort of get them across into their final resting place. 400 years ago, they'd have probably had some big strong buoys and some very thick rope and pulleys and sheaving blocks, similar to what you'd have on the mast of a ship or something like that, or even a capstan.
I was on about ropes. Look, you can see there's a load of grooves in the wall and on the beams there. Probably where they used to pull stuff up.
Once the bells were back in the church, it wasn't long before they were able to ring again.
The blessing of the bells ceremony is a requirement of the local diocese that when the bells have been restored, before they can be formally rung, they are required to be blessed, and we were very flattered when the Bishop John of Bradwell agreed to come and carry out that service.
These bells are blessed and sanctified by the sprinkling of this holy water, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Having the bells back has given a new life to the church and to the community. So many people say how they love to hear the bells ringing, and it gives us a little bit more colour when we do our services. It's just something really good to have for the community.
After having had the bells blessed in March, in May we invited local people, all the people who've been involved in the project, and we had a wonderful open day here.
The celebration of the bells event in May just summarised the whole ethos. Sometimes it's good to give yourself a moment to glorify, and it's just recognise the achievement.
So this event has proved, exactly as others do, bells do draw people together. They bring the communities together. You've got people here perhaps who don't go to church, but they'll turn out for an event.
To see so many bell ringers from around the country who were so keen to ring those special bells was a very, very interesting moment indeed.
I've been ringing since 1974, and my main interest in bell ringing is visiting different churches with different bells, and so a number of us have come quite a long way today. I've come from Hampshire and found that they rang very nicely and they sounded brilliant as well. It's a very good project and we're very pleased to come over.
Since the completion of the restoration works, the bell ringing community of Essex and beyond can't wait to come and ring the bells.
It's very exciting ringing these bells because they're so old, and one can feel previous generations of ringers who've actually tried to celebrate events in the village by ringing them.
We didn't know at the time when this project commenced that there was going to be a jubilee. We didn't know that sadly we was going to lose our Queen. For 140 years almost, national events have been silent. That's something to be proud of.
For all those years I was here, we had very few people really, and there was often conversation about whether we could continue, whether we would be able financially to keep the building intact. It is a story of hope, a story of what can happen anywhere if people get together and come together with an exciting project like this one.
It's been a real achievement to get this far because so many people have been involved, given a lot of their time and energy to this project. It has brought a lot of people together, and we're just very, very proud to have achieved it. And thank you to everybody who's helped.
Ring out for West Hanningfield.